Minnesota tonight. Tune in, Minnesota tonight. Minnesota tonight. Tune in, Minnesota tonight. Tune in, Minnesota. Tune in, Minnesota tonight. Tune in, Minnesota tonight. Tonight. Minnesota tonight. Tonight. Minnesota tonight. Minnesota tonight. Yeah. I'll probably take those.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, wow, guys. Thank you so much. I'm Cody Nelson.
And I'm Alsa Bruno.
And this is the state of Minnesota. A wintry mix of sleet and snow caused havoc on Twin Cities roads Saturday morning, creating slick surfaces which led to multiple crashes and over 300 spinouts. But the extreme conditions weren't all bad. X-Games spokesman Shaun White was reported as saying, "It's actually been some pretty fresh gnar, brah."
The Minnesota Vikings' attempt to rename a portion of Chicago Avenue Vikings Way fell flat at City Hall last Monday night when the City Planning Commission said they wouldn't name any road after the Vikings that wasn't a dead end.
Burnsville police officers shot and killed a man allegedly brandishing a knife in a McDonald's parking lot Thursday morning, the first police shooting in the city in 35 years. This incident marks another 35-year cycle of sacrifices to the gods of ancient Burnsville, who mandate that all residents may now go back to bed. A man from Plymouth, Minnesota was arrested after he apparently stole $250,000 from his ailing 90-year-old mother while neglecting to care for her. Instead, he spent most of his time watching pornography and spending money on gambling. And all of a sudden, I just became a pretty good son.
State employers reported that they had more than 96,000 positions to fill in the final quarter of last year. 96,000 positions. It sounds like sex.
You're a real Casanova. 5 schools in Cloquet canceled school this week due to a computer virus. The source of the hacker is still unknown, though if we had to put our money on it, our bet's on the nerdy kid who all of a sudden has 1,000 friends on Monday.
The former mayor of Watson, Minnesota, Joseph Mark Rongstad, faces charges for reckless discharge of a firearm after a February incident where he fired a rifle through the sunroof of his truck, claiming he was trying to get away from the corpses that were after him. Rongstad proudly joins the growing number of white males who get so bored with their lack of obstacles that they have to invent situations where creatures pursue them.
The Minneapolis City Council is preparing to debate a citywide ban on plastic bags. For supporters, the ban would help reduce needless waste, but opponents argue that plastic bags are the #1 source of camcorder footage used by weird neighbor kids to seduce Kevin Spacey's daughter.
Minneapolis police are investigating a string of 6 robberies, including one in which a 74-year-old man was held up in broad daylight, or as we call it in Minneapolis, the early bird special.
In April, Glam Doll Donuts in Minneapolis will add brunch to their menu, including breakfast sandwiches with donuts in place of bread. When asked if their brunch will include anything beside crap shoved between glazed donuts, the owners made fart noises with their mouth and then went like this.
Minnesota State Senator Chris Eaton withdrew an assisted suicide bill after 2 hours of impassioned testimony Wednesday, rather than allowing a vote. Opponents said the measure could lead to an increase in suicide rates, which supporters replied, "Yeah, that's the point."
Minnesota-based company General Mills will begin voluntarily labeling products nationwide that contain genetically modified ingredients. PR reps for General Mills are telling consumers to expect many other big changes in labeling, namely the death of the Honey Nut Cheerios bee by pesticides and the unveiling of Monsanto, the 4th Rice Krispies elf.
According to a study by the University of Minnesota, 2/3 of small-town grocery store owners plan on closing their doors within the next 10 years, turning rural areas into food deserts. This is, of course, in addition to rural areas already being fun deserts, culture deserts, and minority deserts.
Senator Al Franken attacked Republican responses to Obama's newest Supreme Court pick by saying that they reminded him of his past life as a comedian, in that they were poorly executed and mostly just sad.
New research shows that 13% of working-age Minnesotans who earn less than $35,000 annually have diabetes, compared to just 5% of earners who make more than $35,000. Income was consistently linked with associated factors like education, access to medical care, and dying of diabetes.
A Twin Cities writer named Donna Trump said in an interview with the Star Tribune that since the beginning of the presidential campaign, she's ashamed to say her name and doesn't want it to be the first thing people know about her. Still, I don't think it's out of line to keep everyone named Trump out of the country just for a while, just to be safe until we can figure out what's going on with those people.
A St. Paul man who described himself as a super racist with a kind heart is being charged with assault after reportedly punching a hospital employee who was wearing a yarmulke. After hearing the defendant's statement, a Ramsey County judge declared, "Okay, we'll send you to Kind Heart Jail."
The Minneapolis City Council gave final approval to start a $129 million renovation on the Target Center this May. Included in the renovation package are new restrooms, food and beverage areas, and Minneapolis legally changing its name to Target Town. A recent report names Mankato, Minnesota as the city with the fifth lowest unemployment rate in the country at 2.5%. Now this seems impressive, but things really balance out once you factor in all the MSU students taking bong rips like it's their job.
Prince announced plans for his first memoir, which will cover the period of time from Prince's first memory to his Super Bowl performance in 2007. The book, which is written with lavender-scented ink on the Shroud of Turin, will be available to all local florists during full moons. The audiobook, however, will be released exclusively on Tidal.
A recent study reported that Minnesota is one of the top states where head lice show resistance to common treatments. Local doctors and biologists were excited to research further into cures until it was reported that these super lice are just en route from New York to San Francisco and got stuck here on a layover.
A recent National Geographic piece shed light on an office building in St. Paul in 1965, where half the floors observed daylight saving time, and the other half did not. And you thought scheduling meetings was tough?
See, because half of them are like an hour ahead.
It's like, is it now? Or was it
I
like
thought the
an
meeting was in an hour.
But
Oh, you. Yesterday was the six-county Twin Cities Metro Area Regional Spelling Bee, the winner of which moved on to the Scripps National Spelling Bee in Washington, D.C. this May. As a former competitor in the Minnesota Spelling Bee, I don't even want to make a joke. I just want to say C-O-N-G-R-A-T. Great work, everybody. I'm sure you had a lot of fun. Once again, I'm somebody who inhaled a bug on the way to the meeting today and almost threw up on the road.
I once shot myself in a McDonald's parking lot.
And this was the state of Minnesota. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tonight, we'll take 10 to talk about high school graduation, the only thing powerful enough to end High School Musical. But sadly, it was not powerful enough to end Glee. Graduating high school is important for many reasons, from the economic and social opportunities a diploma affords, to the privilege of wearing a class ring, a piece of jewelry that lets everyone in a room know that the best years of your life are behind you. Recently, there has been some exciting news about the number of students nationwide who are graduating from high school.
Good news about education in the United States. The high school graduation rate has hit an all-time high.
That rate has improved to 82% in the 2013-2014 school year.
Woo! 82%, a B minus. Nothing says America like celebrating slightly above average. But there's just one tiny little qualification to that.
But there are still some gaps depending on race and where students live.
Yes, like a suburban outlet mall, there are definitely some gaps. But that can't be a problem for us here in Minnesota. I mean, we're like super smart. Like, literally, we put the M in NPR, so... Yeah, so... We do. Look it up. And we are regularly reminded of our intellectual superiority by the media. Recently, the Washington Post named Minnesota as one of the smartest states in the nation after one of its reporters saw us solve a difficult math equation while we were supposed to be doing janitor stuff. We are basically a state full of Doogie Howser PhDs reading Immanuel Kant in the original German while preparing for our oboe recital. So, I gotta know, what's Minnesota's high school graduation rate? Tell me so I can frame it and put it on my wall of state pride next to Paul Bunyan's hatchet and a picture of Minnesota kicking Wisconsin where curds. Come on, just tell me.
We are slightly below the national rate. Our graduation rate here is 81% overall.
Wow.
Fuck! But below average? What are we, Iowa?
Iowa, our neighbors to the south, top graduation rate in the country, 90%.
Wow.
Fuck! Iowa. How can they be smarter than us? I mean, their state university mascot is a bird unsuccessfully escaping a blender. Okay, while it may hurt our state pride to know that we couldn't even top a place where it's legal to marry a bale of hay, when you look at the numbers more in depth, you will find a surprisingly large number of Minnesota high school students do not graduate. As of 2015, only 81% of public high school students graduated on time. That means out of the 65,000 high school seniors in Minnesota any given year, 12,000 of them are not graduating, meaning in every 4 years, 48,000 people leave high school without earning a degree, which for reference is the size of the entire town of Edina. And a lot like Edina, this is particularly terrible for minorities. It's true. Data from the U.S. Department of Education shows that when compared to other states, Minnesota has one of the lowest graduation rates for African American, Native American, and Asian American students. And Minnesota has the lowest graduation rate in the entire country for Hispanic students. It's truly a bad sign when the annual crop of Minnesota high school graduates has as much racial diversity as an episode of Friends. Sure, there are some people of color, but definitely not as many as there should be. Now, while there are many factors that contribute to a student's academic success, one closely connected to graduation rates is the number of student support staff. The term support staff refers to nearly all the professionals that work with students outside of a classroom, which includes guidance counselors, psychologists, nurses, and social workers. Basically, it's anyone who has to deal with when shit goes down. And while people with these positions don't directly teach students, as their name suggests, they provide the social, mental, and administrative support students need so that they can learn. Just listen to this Minnesota guidance counselor discuss all the things they do as part of their job.
We work in the classroom doing developmental guidance lessons, working on helping the kids develop certain social skills that they're going to need, conflict resolution skills, things like that, anger management, how to deal with stress.
Now, that's super important because school isn't easy. In early education or later, learning how to not go insane while sitting under fluorescent lights for 8 hours a day is an acquired skill. And support staff exists because sometimes we all need help remembering how to do that. But since the early 1990s, Minnesota has spent a minuscule 2.3% of all education funding on student support staff. That's less than half the national average. And it has only gotten worse in the last 10 years. In 2006, when the state was experiencing budget shortfalls, then the Minnesota governor, Tim Pawlenty, the son of a manila envelope and an oversized suit jacket, slashed education spending and proposed legislation that would require 70% of the state's school budgets to be spent only on classroom instruction. Because if the state is short on money, obviously we should take it out on the children. Pawlenty might as well have proposed generating revenue by holding kids by their ankles and shaking them lunch money from their pockets. Nothing describes Republican policy better than sacrificing tomorrow's future to solve today's problems. Since then, with limited resources and no state minimums for numbers of student support staff, Minnesota has had one of the highest student to support staff ratios in the country. Let's check back in with that counselor.
I am the only school counselor, and we have about 600 students.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. One adult taking on 600 students seems almost impossible, even if that counselor was John C. Thank you, my 13-year-old cousin Tyler, for that joke. But honestly, that counselor is comparatively lucky because the average student-to-school counselor ratio in Minnesota is 743 students to 1 counselor, which is more than double the ratio suggested by the American Association of School Counselors. And while that certainly sucks for the overworked school counselors, it's even worse for the students. High school students who don't have sufficient access to a school counselor may not know if they have taken the classes they need to graduate, or what to do when they are struggling in math or English, or let alone anything in the college application process. And access to support services is even more important for students of color who are disproportionately affected by poverty and attend under-resourced schools. When the lack of support staff is taken into consideration, it's really no wonder that graduation rates are so low. Because when people say it takes a village to raise a child, the same still applies to help a student graduate from high school. And thus far, we have pretty much been burning the village and sending our kids to be raised by wolves in the wilderness. Maybe they'll found Rome or something. Luckily, Minnesota State Senator Susan Kent has proposed legislation that would increase funds for student support staff throughout the state. However, there are no guarantees that this legislation will pass, so here at Minnesota Tonight, we have come up with a solution. In order to reach all the Minnesotan students that aren't getting the help that they need, we are going to reach students the only way adults know how these days, internet memes. That's right, we've come up with the official Minnesota Tonight meme to do all the important work student support staff should be doing, but can't because they haven't been hired. Starring Minnesota icon Paul Bunyan. So, prepare to meet your new school nurse, a photo of Paul Bunyan in a lab coat. Introduce yourself to the social worker, Paul Bunyan. He's emotionally available and sits backwards in a chair. His silence means he's listening. And finally, meet high school guidance counselor Bunyan, who was simultaneously going to schedule your senior year, write you a recommendation for college, and ensure you graduate on time, but because he has 743 other students to get to, he won't be able to meet with you today. That's our show. Stay nice, Minnesota. Good night.
Minnesota Tonight.
Thank you. For tonight's Minterview, we are going to be interviewing Shakita Thomas, the Assistant Director of TRIO Educational Talent Search associated with Century College in East St. Paul. Let's give it up for her one more time. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. Now, Shakita, you are not only the assistant director of the program, but you also have a caseload of how many students?
230.
230 students. Okay, so can you just say, what's just like a cross-section of your regular day? What are some of the things that you do throughout the day?
Various things. So meeting with students stop in here and there and may have questions. I also do some administrative work helping to set up campus visits, ordering buses, also like putting out fires here and there. But it's quite a bit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that doesn't seem like necessary according to the state. What you do, a lot of what you do through the Educational Talent Search program is a lot similar to like a student support staff, such as a school's counselor or a college access counselor at the school. So why do you think there has been such of a lack of investment in those positions throughout the state?
I think it's partly because of priorities, and here in Minnesota, we pride ourselves on being great, and we don't see anything else that's going on. And so part of it is due to priorities, and then also funding. We always say that we don't have the money, and so in some schools, they don't have enough money to provide that additional support staff that the students really need.
And so, in your experience, do the students use those support staff, and do they need those professionals in the school?
Yes, I will say they do need the support staff because they are also adults who have developed relationships with them and know not just about school life, but also about things that are going on outside of school. And
things go on outside of school?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. was thinking back to my experience.
So yeah, like students come to school, and sometimes it's hard for them just to focus, and sometimes it's not easy for them to know, how do I be organized? How can I figure that out? And so support staff is there to help them with those
Right, because
skills.
adults get it. Adults are organized.
Yeah.
We figured it all out. We have a high school or college diploma. Don't need anyone helping us out anymore. And so what are some of the biggest challenges you see for students to learn in the classroom? What are some of the barriers that a lot of students are facing to actually do what it takes to graduate?
Partly is the understanding of like the culture of the school and what is expected of them, and sometimes what is taking place at home. Partly also comes to deal with like, you know, mobility and like people, like when students come to school, sometimes they're worried about like, okay, where am I going to lay my head at night when I go back home, and you're asking me to figure out this math problem right now. Like I'm not trying to fill this right now. I'm not trying to do this. And so, and then oftentimes I go back to, I will share my own personal experience because this highlights like a lot of the stories that my students share as well. Like growing up in Chicago, I know that it wasn't expected for me to graduate high school and even let alone go off to college, because my mom got pregnant at the age of 16. My sisters, both my older sisters, I got pregnant at the age of 16. And so when I became at that age, a lot of people were looking at me like, oh, when are you going to have your, you're the next person. And so it just wasn't viewed or expected. And so when I exceeded those norms, it was different, but a lot of our kids are facing that as well in terms of the expectations that people have of them, and trying to go against that and be successful. And it's hard when people at school don't oftentimes know or understand what they're going through. And so when you have a support staff who can be there just to hear them out and spend that time, the extra hours, just to hear their own personal story, that's important in helping them to get through.
Yeah,
So
that sounds super important. So how can, say, someone who is an adult human who has gone through the gauntlet of the public school system and now exists in the world and, like, you know, loves life, obviously. What can people do to, you know, help students gain that support that they really need in school to overcome those barriers, to graduate and to do anything outside?
Partly, they can serve as volunteers. They can work in those roles, working with students. There are always opportunities where you can come and become a tutor or be a mentor. It doesn't cost much to do that.
Yeah, all you have to do is know how to turn your chair backwards, and you got it.
And start talking to the kids and building those relationships.
Yeah, listen, teens, let's relate. You know,
or share your personal experience. Share your personal experience and letting them know that you're human as well. And I think that partly, like, we all have to understand that education is very political. We don't want to say that. We don't want to talk about it, but it is. And so it's important for us to be educated about what's going on in our school system, and also be watching out in the legislature to see, like, what's taking place, which is currently, we know that there are some bills that are trying to increase support staff as well as to increase teacher diversity within Minnesota schools, which is a huge issue here in Minnesota as well.
Right. I'm sure that our teaching force is really diverse, right? Okay, that's something for a different show.
That's a different show.
Everyone, Shakita Thomas, Trio ETS Assistant Director. Thank you so much for being on the show.
No problem.
Tonight, Minnesota tonight. Minnesota tonight. Yeah. I'll probably take those.
Everyone, night of joy.
Just because I hang around this place. Yeah, you drag me to your progress parade. Yeah, then you hate me when I call up the charade. What do I know about the better life? What did you think that you're too rich for this? What do you know about the bitter life? What did you think that you had built your paradise? The news don't faze me, I'm already in another state. Yeah, I go crazy, but my friends and I self-medicate. Call it apathy, but you don't know the stakes. No, what about poverty? Well, they say those are the breaks. What do you know about the better life? What did you think that you're too rich for this? What do you know about the better life? What did you think that you had built your paradise? What do we know about the better life? What did we think that we're too rich for this? What do we know about the better life? What did we think that we had built up there? What do we know about the better life? What did we think that we're too rich for this? What do we know about the better life? What did we think that we had built a paradise? Business how we wanted it. We were on something and just wandered in. Oh, how I wish we could begin again. Before I said that we should take that left. Well, I thought I could save us. It was a perfect strike. Hell, I thought I could save us. Sometime. 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 This ain't the holiday we thought we made. We were just searching for a better way. Oh, how I wish we would have never strayed before we ended up so far away. Well, I thought I could save us. It was a perfect crime. Hell, I thought I could save us. Sometime. Sometime. sometime.
Tune in, Minnesota tonight. Tune in, Minnesota tonight. Minnesota tonight. Tune in, Minnesota tonight. Tune in, Minnesota. Tune in, Minnesota tonight. Tune in, Minnesota tonight. Tonight. Minnesota tonight. Minnesota tonight.